Imagine a soldier's instincts flaring in a crowded Costco. Could a little girl's wave save her life? Stick with me to uncover this gripping tale of bravery and danger. Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're tuning in from. Hit like and subscribe for more stories that pull you in. Let's begin. The summer sun blazed over the Costco parking lot in Boise, Idaho, where John Carter, a retired soldier in his mid-50s, maneuvered his truck into a space near the entrance. The engine growled as he shut it off. Taking his Costco membership card, he steps out, his boots hitting the pavement with a steady thud. Years of military service had kept his frame strong, his stride confident, despite the gray creeping into his short-cropped hair. Beside him, his teenage nephew, Caleb, climbed out of the passenger seat, earbuds dangling from his neck, his focus locked on his phone. "Keep up, kid," John said, his voice firm but warm. "We're just grabbing a few things for your mom's barbecue tomorrow." Caleb nodded absently, thumbs tapping away at his screen. Yeah, burgers, buns, whatever." Inside the store, the air conditioning washed over them, a sharp relief from the heat outside. John grabbed a cart and headed toward the grocery aisles, his eyes scanning the signs above. Shoppers moved around them, parents steering kids, couples debating snack choices, employees restocking shelves. It was a typical Saturday crowd, busy but calm. John liked the rhythm of it, the way it felt orderly even in the chaos. As they passed the home goods section, a young girl caught John's attention. She stood near a display of colorful throw pillows, her dark hair tied back with a red ribbon. She couldn't have been more than 8 or 9. A man stood beside her, tall and broad-shouldered, his face hidden under a baseball cap as he adjusted a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. The girl clutched a small pillow shaped like a star, her fingers tracing its edges. She whispered something to the man, who shook his head sharply and tugged her arm, urging her to move. John kept walking, but the moment stuck with him. The man's grip on the girl seemed too tight, his posture too tense for a simple shopping trip. John glanced at Caleb, who was still lost in his phone. "You see anything you want to add to the list?" he asked, testing if the kid was even half listening. "Huh? Ooh, chips maybe," Caleb mumbled, not looking up. John shook his head with a faint smile and turned his focus back to the task. They reached the grocery section and he started loading the cart. Ground beef, buns, a pack of sodas. His hands moved with precision, a habit from years of packing gear under pressure. But his mind kept drifting to the girl and the man. Something about them didn't add up. By the time they finished and headed for the checkout, the store felt busier, the lines longer. John steered the cart into lane 7, where a cashier scanned items with quick, practiced motions. Caleb leaned against the cart, scrolling through his phone again. John paid with cash, counting out the bills, when movement outside the big front windows caught his eye. Through the glass, he saw the girl and the man again. They were crossing the parking lot, the girl trailing a step behind. She turned her head, her eyes locking onto John for a split second. Then she raised her hand and waved, a small, deliberate gesture. The man didn't notice, his pace quick as he led her toward a gray van parked near the far end of the lot. John froze, the cashier's voice fading into the background. That wave wasn't a casual hello, it was sharp, urgent, like a signal. His years in the military had honed his instincts, and right now they were screaming. The man's hurried steps, the girl's tense expression, the way she'd looked right at him, it all clicked into something he couldn't ignore. "Sir, your change?" the cashier said, holding out a few coins. John snapped back, taking the money with a quick nod. "Thanks." He grabbed the bags and turned to Caleb. "Let's move." Caleb frowned, finally looking up. "What's the rush?" "Just come on," John said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He pushed the cart toward the exit, his eyes fixed on the van outside. The man was opening the side door now, ushering the girl in. She hesitated, glancing back toward the store one last time before climbing inside. John didn't know what was happening, but he knew it wasn't right. He'd seen too many situations go sideways to brush this off. As they stepped into the heat of the parking lot, he handed the bags to Caleb. "Take these to the truck. Stay there." "Wait, what? Where are you going?" Caleb asked, confusion creasing his face. "I'll be quick," John said, already moving toward the van. His heart pounded steady and strong, his training kicking in. Whatever was going on, he wasn't about to let it slip away without answers. The van's engine rumbled to life as John closed the distance, his boots silent on the asphalt. He didn't have a plan yet, but he didn't need one. Instinct had carried him through worse. This was just the beginning. His phone buzzed in his pocket, snapping him out of his focus. He pulled it out, seeing his sister's name, Lydia, light up the screen. A wave of urgency washed over him. She'd be expecting them back soon for the barbecue prep, but this couldn't wait. He answered, keeping his voice low. Lydia, hey. John, where are you? Caleb's not answering his texts, and I need those burgers. Her tone was light, but there was an edge of worry. I've got the stuff, John said, his eyes never leaving the van. Ran into a snag at Costco. I'll be there soon, promise. Just hold tight, okay? A pause. Everything all right? Yeah, fine, he lied, forcing calm into his words. See you in a bit. He ended the call before she could press further, shoving the phone back into his pocket. Lydia didn't need to know yet. Not until he had answers. The van's engine revved, tires crunching gravel as it rolled toward the lot's exit. John made a choice. He couldn't let them disappear. He jogged to his truck, tossing the bags into the bed with a thud. Caleb straightened up, yanking out an earbud. What's going on, Uncle John? Buckle up, John said, sliding into the driver's seat. We're following that van. Caleb's eyes widened. What? Why? That girl I saw, she waved at me like she needed help. The guy with her doesn't sit right. I can't explain it yet, just trust me. He turned the key, and the truck rumbled to life. Caleb hesitated, then nodded, snapping his seatbelt into place. Okay, but this better not get weird. John shot him a quick look, a half smile breaking through the tension. It's already weird, kid. He pulled out of the parking space, keeping the van in sight as it turned onto the main road. The gray vehicle blended into traffic, but John's trained eyes locked onto it. Years of scanning convoys and spotting threats kicking in. He stayed a few cars back, close enough to track, far enough to avoid notice. The van wove through Boise's bustling streets, passing strip malls and gas stations. John's grip tightened on the wheel. Every turn the man took felt deliberate, like he knew where he was going and wanted to get there fast. Beside him, Caleb sat up straighter, phone forgotten, watching the van too. Where do you think he's headed? Caleb asked, his voice quieter now. No idea, John said, but that girl? She didn't look happy. Something's off, and I'm not letting it go. They hit a red light, and the van stopped 2 cars ahead. John caught a glimpse through the rear window. A small shape moving in the back seat. The girl. She shifted, her head turning slightly, but he couldn't see her face. The man leaned over, saying something sharp, his hand gesturing. John's jaw clenched. The light turned green, and the van surged forward. John followed, keeping his distance. His mind raced, piecing together what he'd seen. The man's tense grip in the store, the girl's wave, the haste to leave. It wasn't enough for proof, but it was enough for him. He'd seen danger before, felt it in his bones, and this had the same weight. Traffic thinned as they left the commercial area, heading toward a quieter part of town. The van turned onto a side street lined with old warehouses and empty lots. John slowed, letting another car pass before making the turn. The van pulled into a gravel lot beside a weathered building, its windows boarded up, paint peeling from the walls. John stopped the truck a block away, parking behind a rusted dumpster. He killed the engine and watched. The man stepped out, glancing around, then opened the van's side door. The girl climbed out slowly, her red ribbon catching the sunlight. She stood still, arms crossed, as the man grabbed the duffel bag and barked something at her. She flinched but followed him toward the building. That doesn't look like a house, Caleb said, leaning forward. What's he doing? Dunno, John replied, his voice steady but hard. But we're finding out. He reached for his phone again, this time dialing 911. The line connected and a woman's voice came through, crisp and clear. 911, what's your emergency? This is John Carter, he said, keeping his tone even. I'm a retired soldier. I'm at an old warehouse off 12th Street in Boise. Saw a man with a young girl at Costco, maybe 8 or 9 years old. She waved at me like she was scared. I followed them here, and it doesn't look right. He's taking her into a building that's half abandoned. All right, Mr. Carter, the dispatcher said, her voice sharpening. Can you describe them? Girl's got dark hair, red ribbon. Man's tall, wearing a cap, carrying a duffel bag. Gray van, no plates I could see clearly. He rattled off the details, his training keeping him precise. We're sending officers now, she said. Stay where you are, don't approach. Can you do that? Yeah, John said, though his gut churned at the thought of waiting. I'm parked a block away, black truck. Tell them to hurry. Understood, officers are en route. The call ended and John set the phone on the dash. Caleb shifted beside him. You think she's in trouble? John nodded, eyes fixed on the building. I know she is. Minutes dragged on, the silence heavy in the truck. John kept watch, every muscle tense, ready to move if he had to. The man and the girl were inside now, out of sight. He hated not knowing what was happening, hated the waiting. But he'd made the call. Help was coming. Then, in the distance, he saw them. 2 police cars rolling down the street, lights flashing but no sirens. Relief hit him, but it didn't erase the knot in his chest. The officers pulled into the lot, and John exhaled. This wasn't over, not yet. Whatever was happening in that warehouse, he'd set it in motion. Now he had to see it through. John Carter stood firm beside his truck, parked behind the rusted dumpster a block from the warehouse in Boise, Idaho. The police cars sat in the gravel lot ahead, their lights flashing silently against the faded building. His chest tightened as he watched the officers step out, their movements quick and deliberate. He adjusted his cap, a faded army emblem stitched on the front, and squared his shoulders, ready to explain what he'd seen. Beside him, Caleb leaned forward, his eyes wide, taking it all in. The 2 officers approached, boots crunching on the uneven ground. The taller one, a man with a weathered face and a salt and pepper beard, spoke first. You the one who called about a girl? His voice was deep, steady, carrying the weight of experience. John nodded, his posture straight from years of habit. Yes, sir, John Carter, retired soldier, that's my nephew Caleb. He gestured to the teen beside him. I saw something at Costco that didn't feel right, followed them here. The second officer, a younger woman with a tight ponytail and a clipboard in hand, tipped her head. Tell us what happened, Mr. Carter. Start from the store. John took a breath, keeping his words clear and sharp. Was shopping with Caleb at Costco off Main Street. Saw a girl, dark hair, red ribbon, in the home goods aisle with a man. He was tense, gripping her arm hard. She didn't seem comfortable. Later, outside, she waved at me as they crossed the parking lot. Not a casual wave, something urgent. I followed them to this warehouse. They went inside a few minutes ago. The officers listened, their faces calm but attentive. The woman jotted notes on her clipboard while the man scanned the building. When John finished, the older officer rubbed his chin. Did you see him do anything to her? Hear her say she needed help? John shook his head, frustration creeping in. No, nothing direct, but I've been in enough tight spots to know when something's wrong. Her eyes, the way she moved. It wasn't normal, that wave was a signal. The woman looked up from her notes, her tone even. We get it, Mr. Carter, but we need more than a feeling to move on this. No missing kid reports match her description right now. Without evidence of a crime. I'm not imagining this, John cut in, his voice firm but controlled. She's scared. He's rushing her into a place like that. He pointed at the warehouse, its broken windows glinting in the late sun. That's not a home. The older officer held up a hand, his tone staying level. We're not saying you're wrong, but we can't storm in based on instinct. You're sure they're still inside? Saw them go in, John said. Haven't seen them come out. The officers exchanged a glance. The woman spoke again, softer this time. Look, we'll check it out. Take a look around the property, see if anything stands out. But if this is just a guy and his kid, we can't push without cause. You've been through a lot in your service, right? Sometimes that wires us to see threats where— This isn't about my past, John said sharply, cutting her off. I know what I saw. The older officer stepped in, his voice carrying a hint of warning. All right, let's keep this calm. We'll do a sweep. But you stay here, Mr. Carter. No hero moves. Let us handle it. Clear? John nodded, though his jaw tightened. Clear. The officers turned and headed toward the warehouse, their radios crackling as they spoke in low tones. John watched them go, every muscle coiled, his mind racing. He didn't like standing still, didn't like the doubt in their words. That girl's wave haunted him, a flicker of trust he couldn't ignore. Caleb shifted beside him, breaking the silence. You think they'll find her? Be better, John muttered, eyes locked on the building. If they don't, I will. He glanced back at the truck, thinking of Lydia waiting at home, the barbecue groceries still in the bed. His phone buzzed again, her name on the screen. He let it ring, focus unbroken. She'd understand later. Right now, this mattered more. The officers reached the warehouse door, one knocking while the other stood ready. No answer. They circled the building, peering through cracked windows, their figures shrinking in the distance. John's hands balled into fists. Waiting felt wrong, but he'd given his word. Minutes stretched on, heavy and slow. The officers returned, their faces grim but unreadable. The older one spoke first. No one's answering. Place looks empty from what we can see. Old furniture, junk piled up. No sign of the man or the girl. John's heart sank, but he kept his voice steady. "They're in there. I saw them." "Maybe," the woman said, tucking her clipboard under her arm. "But we can't break in without a warrant or probable cause. We'll file a report. Keep an eye out. If you see them again, call us. Don't follow this time. Let us take it." John stared at them, disbelief burning in his chest. "That's it? That's what we can do," the older officer said, firm but not harsh. "Go home, Mr. Carter. We've got your info. If something turns up, we'll reach out." They walked back to their cars, leaving John standing there, the weight of the moment pressing down. Caleb kicked at the gravel. "They're just gonna leave?" "Looks that way," John said, his tone low. He watched the police cars pull out, dust trailing behind them. The warehouse loomed silent, mocking him. He couldn't shake it. The girl's face, the man's haste, the van parked out front. This wasn't over. He turned to Caleb. "Get in the truck." "We going home?" Khaled asked, hesitant. John shook his head, eyes narrowing as he studied the warehouse. "Not yet. I need to tell your mom we're delayed. Then we're figuring this out." He climbed into the driver's seat, Lydia's missed call staring at him from the phone. He dialed her back, keeping it short. "Lydia, it's me. Something's come up. Caleb's fine, but we're stuck for a bit. I'll explain when we're back." "John, what's—" she started, but he cut in. "Trust me, okay? I'll call soon." He hung up, staring at the warehouse. The police were gone, but he wasn't done. That girl was in there somewhere, and he wasn't walking away. Not yet. The next move was his. John Carter sat in the driver's seat of his truck, the engine off, the silence thick around him and Caleb. The warehouse loomed a block away, its weathered walls hiding whatever was happening inside. The police had left, their cars disappearing down the street, leaving only dust and unanswered questions. John's hands rested on the steering wheel, his knuckles white from gripping it too long. That girl's wave still burned in his mind, a call he couldn't ignore. Caleb shifted beside him, his voice low. "What now, Uncle John?" "They didn't find anything." John didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed on the warehouse, tracing the boarded windows, the gray van still parked out front. The officers had brushed him off, but he knew better. He'd seen fear before, on battlefields, in the faces of people who couldn't speak it. That girl was in trouble, and he wasn't about to drive away. "I'm going closer," John said, his tone steady. "You stay here." Caleb's head snapped up. "What? No way. You're not leaving me in the truck again." John turned to him, his gaze firm. "This isn't a game, Caleb. If something goes wrong, I need you safe. Call 911 if I'm not back in 10 minutes. Caleb frowned, but the look in John's eyes stopped any argument. "Fine, but be careful." John nodded, stepping out into the warm Boise air. He pulled his cap lower and moved toward the warehouse, sticking to the shadows of the empty lot. His boots were quiet on the gravel, his steps measured from years of training. The van sat unattended, its side door cracked open. He crouched beside it, peering inside. A water bottle lay tipped over on the floor, a damp stain spreading across the carpet. His stomach twisted. She'd been here. He edged toward the building, pressing himself against the wall near a rusted side door. Voices drifted through the thin metal, low, urgent, one sharper than the other. John held his breath, listening. The sharper voice snapped, "Hurry up!" "She's waking up." A muffled reply followed, too faint to catch. His pulse quickened. She was inside, alive but in danger. He tested the door handle. It turned with a soft click. He eased it open, slipping into the dim interior. The air smelled of dust and oil, the space cluttered with old crates and broken shelves, light filtered through cracked windows, casting jagged patterns on the floor. Ahead, a narrow hallway stretched toward the voices. John moved silently, his heart steady despite the stakes. He reached a corner and peered around it. There she was, the girl with the red ribbon, slumped in a chair, her head lolling to one side. Her hands were bound with zip ties. Her face pale, but stirring. The man from the store stood over her, a phone pressed to his ear, his free hand clutching a roll of tape. Another figure, a woman with short hair and a hard expression, paced nearby, a bag slung over her shoulder. "She's fine," the man hissed into the phone. "We'll move her tonight. Just get the cash ready." John's blood ran hot. He scanned the room. 2 exits, one behind the woman, one near the girl. No weapons in sight, but the man's stance screamed fight. John had seconds to decide. He couldn't wait for backup that might never come. He stepped into the open, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. "Let her go, now!" The man spun, surprise flashing across his face before it hardened. "You? Doesn't matter," John said, closing the distance. "Police are on their way. Step back from the girl." The woman froze, then bolted for the bag, pulling out a small knife. She lunged at John, but he was faster. He sidestepped, grabbing her wrist and twisting hard. The knife hit the floor with a clatter, and he shoved her back, sending her stumbling into a crate. The man charged, fists swinging, but John ducked and drove a solid punch into his gut. The man doubled over, gasping. John didn't stop. He grabbed a loose pipe from the floor and swung it low, catching the man's legs. He crumpled, groaning. The woman scrambled up, but John pointed the pipe at her. "Stay down," he warned, his voice ice cold. She hesitated, then sank back, hands raised. He moved to the girl, kneeling beside her. Her eyes fluttered open, hazy but aware. "Hey," he said softly, cutting the zip ties with his pocket knife. "You're okay. I've got you." She blinked at him, recognition flickering. "The store." Her voice was weak, but it held. "Yeah," John said, lifting her gently. "Let's get you out of here." The sound of sirens grew closer, slicing through the tension. John carried her toward the door, her slight weight steadying him. The man and woman stayed down, the fight gone from them. Outside, police cars roared into the lot, lights flashing red and blue. Caleb's voice called out from the truck, sharp with relief. "Uncle John!" Officers swarmed the scene, weapons drawn. John set the girl down as a paramedic rushed over, wrapping her in a blanket. She clung to his sleeve for a moment, then let go as medics took over. "Pulse is weak," one said. "Looks like she was sedated. We'll get her to the hospital." John stepped back, watching as officers cuffed the man and woman. A detective approached, his badge glinting. "Mr. Carter? I'm Detective Hayes, heard your call. Looks like you didn't wait." "Couldn't," John said, meeting his gaze. "She didn't have time." Hayes nodded, a hint of respect in his eyes. "We found pills in the van, sedatives. IDs, too, fake ones. You stopped something big here. Trafficking, most likely." John exhaled, the weight lifting slightly. "She's safe. That's what matters." The girl, now awake, looked at him from the stretcher, her red ribbon tangled but bright. "I'm Leah," she said, her voice small but clear. "Thank you." John smiled, a rare softness breaking through. "Leah, good name. You're welcome." A car screeched into the lot, a frantic couple spilling out with an officer trailing behind. "Leah," the woman cried, rushing to her daughter. The man followed, tears streaking his face. They enveloped her, a family whole again. Caleb jogged over, stopping beside John. "You're crazy, you know that?" "Sometimes it takes crazy," John said, clapping his shoulder. "You did good staying put." The detective approached again. "We'll need your statement, Mr. Carter. Station's waiting." John nodded. "Let me call my sister first, she's expecting us." He dialed Lydia, her voice sharp with worry. "John, where are you? Caleb okay?" "We're fine," he said, calm now. "Saved a girl. I'll tell you everything later. Barbecue might be late." A pause, then a shaky laugh. "You're unbelievable." He hung up, turning to Caleb. "Ready?" "Yeah," Caleb said, grinning. "Mom's gonna freak when she hears this." As they walked to the truck, the sun dipped low, painting the sky gold. Leia's parents waved at John, gratitude shining in their eyes. He waved back, climbing into the driver's seat. The day had started with groceries and ended with a rescue. Retirement, he realized, didn't mean resting, it meant fighting where he stood, here, now, for people like Leah. He started the engine, glancing at Caleb. "Think we've got a story for the family?" Caleb laughed. "Oh yeah, best one yet." With the warehouse fading in the rear view, John drove toward the station, a quiet pride settling in his chest. The soldier in him had never left. Today it had found a new purpose, one he'd carry forward wherever it led. If you enjoyed this story, like and subscribe for more stories that pull you in.